I don't remember dying, but according to the town records, I no longer exist. I stepped off the bus with a backpack slung over my shoulder and a name no one dared speak anymore. Elena Voss. That name used to mean something in this town. It belonged to the girl who kept the Voss farm running after her parents left. The granddaughter who stayed behind to take care of Pop before he passed. The woman who didn't run when things got hard until the day she had to. 2 years ago, I left Halewood to hike the Andean mountains in Peru, a soul-searching trip that turned into survival, a rockfall, a fractured spine, months in an off-grid recovery center. No phone, no signal, just silence. I sent letters when I could. I thought they'd never reached home, but I was wrong. They did, they just didn't want me back. It was early spring when I returned, the kind of spring where everything smells like thawed soil and damp roots. I walked through Halewood like a ghost because in their minds that's what I was. My first stop was the bank. I needed access to my old savings to find a place to stay. I still had my debit card expired or not, and the face on my ID hadn't changed much. But when I swiped the card, the teller blinked at the screen and frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "There's no active account linked to this card." "That's impossible," I said, heart skipping. I had over 20 grand in that account. She excused herself. 10 minutes later, a manager came out. "Ms. Voss," he said cautiously, "we have a note on file. This account was closed due to the account holder's passing." My fingers curled around the strap of my backpack. "I'm the account holder. I'm standing right here." He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm afraid you'll need to verify your identity. Do you have your birth certificate or a government-issued document?" "I have my passport." He took it, disappeared again. When he returned, his eyes were wider. This passport is marked invalid. According to the state registry, Elena Voss was declared legally deceased 6 months ago. I didn't speak. I couldn't. A strange coldness settled in my spine, colder than the Andes, colder than the recovery room where I once lay strapped to machines. I walked out without another word. Next, I went to the old farm, Pop's Land, 42 acres of green Vermont fields, a red barn, and a 2-story white farmhouse that used to smell like fresh bread and apple soap. But now there was a brand new mailbox with someone else's name on it. Vivian Ainsley, it read. My sister. The sister who used to braid my hair when Mom disappeared. The one who said she'd handle the paperwork while I recovered overseas. The one who apparently buried me without a body. There was a black SUV in the driveway, wind chimes on the porch, and 2 little kids running around with water balloons. I didn't recognize any of them. My breath hitched. This was my home, and they'd erased me from it. I didn't knock. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream like the dramatic heroines on TV. I turned and walked back down the road, gravel crunching under my boots, each step heavier than the last. I checked the county records later that night, sitting in the back corner of a diner using free Wi-Fi. It was all there in black and white. Certificate of death, Elena Jean Voss. Date of death, October 19th, 2023. Cause presumed missing, declared deceased by family affidavit. My sister Vivian signed the affidavit. My cousin Theo was the second witness. The town clerk approved it. Just like that, no investigation, no verification. All it took was a missing persons report and the word of 2 relatives. And with that certificate, everything that belonged to me was reassigned. The land, the inheritance from Pop, even the education grant I'd established for local girls absorbed into a family foundation now bearing Vivian's name. That night I sat on the floor of a $28 motel room and stared at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. Was this what dying felt like? Not the sudden stop of breath, but the quiet deletion of identity. Not a funeral, but a signature. Not a coffin, but a spreadsheet. They didn't kill me with knives or poison. They just stopped acknowledging I had a pulse. I wanted to scream, to barge into that white farmhouse and shatter every window with the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I did what ghosts do best. I vanished. I found a room to rent under the table cash. Only I picked up night shifts at a late-hours bar, pouring drinks for college students who'd never heard the name Voss. I changed the way I walked, tied my hair up, started answering to Lena. And slowly, I started digging. Not with shovels, but emails, requests, record logs, court filings, every string I could pull. And what I found underneath it all wasn't just betrayal. It was a blueprint. They hadn't just declared me dead. They'd planned it, filed documents in sequence, created backup narratives, opened shell accounts, transferred assets 6 days after my supposed date of death. They thought I was gone. They thought the dead stayed quiet. They were wrong. There's a saying in Halewood, you can pave over the land, but it still remembers what it grew. And Pop Voss, he left me more than just soil. I found the will by accident, if you believe in accidents. It was hidden in the back of a library archive box, tucked between old land surveys and township zoning permits. The clerk had let me browse after hours because I claimed I was doing research for a community history project. Technically, I was. It just wasn't for the public. The envelope was yellowed with age. My grandfather's handwriting was unmistakable, blocky, precise, always written in blue ink. It read Last Will and Testament, Howard E. Voss revised 2021. That was just months before he died. I read the entire document in the dark corner of the archive room with a flashlight between my knees. He didn't leave the farm to Vivian. He didn't split it with Theo. He didn't set up a board to manage the education grant like they claimed. He left everything to me, sole beneficiary, executor, trustee. With one clause, one line that made me stop breathing for a full 10 seconds. This inheritance is to pass to Elena Jean Voss only if she is living past her 30th birthday, as I believe she is the only one in this family who would never use my land to get rich only to give something back. My hands trembled as I reread it. I was 34. He had trusted me, and they buried that trust with a fake death certificate and a staged funeral no one invited me to. The question that echoed loudest wasn't how they did it. It was when they decided I was disposable. I spent the next 3 weeks watching them. Vivian still ran the Voss Legacy Fund, a nonprofit name slapped over a private development project. They were selling off parcels of Pop's land for luxury vacation cabins and calling it preserving local heritage. Theo, my cousin, had always been the golden boy in family photos. He now styled himself as a land use consultant and drove around in the very same Jeep Pop used to take us fishing in. I almost laughed when I saw it. I followed them from a distance, camera in my pocket, notebook in hand, phone set to record every slip of the tongue. I wasn't gathering evidence, I was building a weapon. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I needed someone who knew how to navigate legal shadows and stay quiet doing it. Enter Grant Mullins. I found him through a friend of a friend bartender who once said, if you're ever in trouble, Grant's the guy who can make paper scream. Grant didn't wear a tie. He wore suspicion like cologne. He didn't blink much, but when I told him my story and slid the real will across the diner table, his eyes finally widened. You're telling me they forged a death certificate to invalidate this? He asked, voice flat. They didn't just forge it, I said. They used it to retitle a property worth over $25 million. He leaned back, and you've stayed dead this whole time. Dead women don't sign lawsuits, I replied. That was the moment we shook hands. Grant began the process of verifying the original will, quietly off the record. He filed for certified copies of notarized pages, contacted Pop's old lawyer in Arizona, and traced the chain of signatures on the fake death certificate. Turns out Vivian had requested the certificate herself, citing my disappearance in Peru as cause for presumption of death. Theo had acted as the secondary affiant. The county clerk approved it without due process, just a whisper campaign and some teary crocodile smiles. It was legal, but barely, and definitely fraudulent. I could have gone to the police. I could have stormed a courtroom. But I wasn't interested in headlines. I wanted control. And control required patience. So instead of making noise, I made moves. Under my new name, Lena Rhodes, I began acquiring small shares in Theo's newest development company. It was a shell corporation operating under a trust linked to the Voss estate. He thought he was laundering inheritance money through clean LLCs. But now I owned 11% of his future. Vivian, she was more careful. She'd built herself a fortress of lawyers and fake philanthropy. But I knew something she didn't. She hadn't touched Pop's trust fund because that required court oversight. And court oversight meant exposing the real will, which meant the very thing they stole was the one thing they couldn't touch. So instead they danced around it, built projects, signed leases, moved money in and out of private accounts, all the while assuming the corpse in the ground couldn't talk. I was done playing dead, but I wasn't ready to speak yet. Instead, I decided to let them speak for me. At the annual Halewood Heritage Banquet, Vivian was slated to give a speech on the preservation efforts of the Voss family legacy. Grant and I had already arranged for that to be the perfect stage. We invited the right people. The wrong ones, too. We scheduled a press release, subtle, quiet set to go live the moment I walked into the room. They thought they'd buried the truth with my name. They forgot one thing. I still owned my grandfather's silence, and I was about to break it. The night of the Halewood Heritage Banquet arrived all champagne smiles and silver-plated lies. Vivian wore a deep navy gown and a pearl necklace I recognized, Pop's gift to our mother, one that somehow vanished from her jewelry box after the funeral. She stood at the podium like a queen consecrating her kingdom. The screen behind her flashed images of the farm now scrubbed of its past and rebranded as Voss Meadows Eco Haven. I sat at a table near the back, unseen, uninvited, but very much alive. Vivian's voice floated over the room like a lullaby. We've come a long way, she said, all warmth and theater. What once was our grandfather's farmland is now a sustainable sanctuary for families to reconnect with the land just as he would have wanted. I almost laughed. Pop didn't believe in sanctuaries. He believed in sweat, soil, and honesty. 3 things my sister had surgically removed from his legacy. Grant sat across from me, pretending to scroll through his phone. But at exactly 8:37 p.m., he tapped the side of his glass twice the signal. The email had gone out. Not a press release, a legal notice. To every stakeholder, town council member, reporter, and registered donor of the Voss Legacy Fund. Subject line urgent. Legal challenge to Voss estate inheritance and alleged fraudulent death declaration. And just like that, the whispers began. Vivian's eyes flickered. She wasn't stupid. She knew something had shifted. She locked eyes with Theo across the room, her smile twitching, and still she had to finish the speech, pretending nothing had cracked beneath her heels. But oh, something had. That night wasn't the reveal. It was just the opening of a curtain. The real play was already in motion. I had spent the last 6 months turning myself into something more dangerous than a ghost. A shareholder, an investor, a silent partner in the very companies that had cannibalized my family's legacy. Through Lena Rhodes LLC, I had purchased shares in Havenstone Properties, Theo's flagship development firm that managed all the Voss estate parcels. I did it in pieces, through intermediaries, through blind trusts. So while he thought he was spreading his wings, I was clipping them. Every contract they signed, every parcel they mortgaged, every dollar they borrowed, passed through some form of Lena Rhodes's approval. Vivian had always been the schemer. The politician Theo, on the other hand, was the weak link, the one who followed orders but didn't check the fine print. And in that recklessness, I found my back door in. Theo borrowed against Voss Meadows to invest in a speculative build in New Hampshire without telling Vivian. What he didn't know was that the loan paperwork required a majority shareholder's co-signature. I signed it, then triggered the default clause. It was a small explosion, just a tremor really, but enough to make Theo panic, enough to make Vivian furious, enough to make the developers and investors pause long enough to read the legal email Grant had sent them. I didn't need to yell. I just needed them to doubt, because doubt in high society spreads faster than fire. Days passed, then weeks. Rumors started circling. Didn't Elena Voss die 2 years ago? I heard she's alive. I heard she's suing. Did you see that court filing? Says the original will named her. The Halewood Council called an emergency session. A formal investigation into the Voss Legacy Fund's financial activities was open, donations dried up, the press began poking around. And in the center of the storm, I remained quiet, until Theo cracked. He showed up at the bar, where I still worked part-time, hood up, eyes frantic. "I don't know who you are," he said, "but I think you're messing with the wrong people." I smiled maybe, but you don't even know who you're working for, do you? He froze, so I leaned in just enough for him to see my eyes, the same eyes that once looked up at him across Pop's dinner table. "Elena?" The word left his mouth like a curse. I stood, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked away. 3 days later, I received a message from Vivian. No subject line, just one line in the body. "You should have stayed dead." And that's how I knew she was scared. I let the silence stretch a little longer. Long enough for her to stew. Long enough for the public to turn skeptical. Long enough for the real paperwork to land on her desk, served legally wrapped in blue ribbon and cold truth. A formal petition to revoke the false death declaration, a reassertion of my legal identity, and a motion to restore the original Voss will complete with a list of forged documents, witness affidavits, and digital timestamps. Grant delivered it personally. Vivian didn't open the door, but she didn't have to. She knew. They thought they could steal everything and bury the evidence beneath a tombstone that never existed. They forgot one thing. Ghosts don't die. They watch, they wait, and eventually, they rise. The morning of the grand opening arrived with champagne chill and hollow speeches. They called it Voss Meadows Eco Haven, a sanitized name for what used to be Pop's land, wild, imperfect, and alive. I remembered the way the soil smelled after summer rain, the way Pop used to say, "Land isn't something you flip, it's something you keep breathing with." Vivian never understood that. She understood marketing, she understood optics, and she thought she understood control. The grand opening was held on the edge of the eastern fields where our old swing set once stood. Now it was a sleek platform with a branded backdrop, folding chairs lined in rows, and a local news crew already setting up near the stage. I arrived an hour before the event started. No one recognized me. Not yet. The press pass Grant secured listed me as Lena Rhodes, Regional Sustainability Correspondent. I wore a charcoal gray dress and a low ponytail. Glasses, neutral lips, no trace of the girl they'd declared dead. I didn't shake hands. I just watched. Vivian was in her element, laughing poised. Theo looked more ragged shadows beneath his eyes, collar too tight. I saw it then, the cracks beneath the paint. A local news anchor began speaking into the camera. "We're here at the highly anticipated grand opening of Voss Meadows, a legacy project repurposing one of Vermont's oldest family farms into a state-of-the-art sustainable living community." Legacy? Funny word for theft. At exactly 11:06 a.m., the ribbon-cutting ceremony began. Vivian stepped up to the podium, flashing that curated smile. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate a dream built not just by hands, but by heart. My grandfather, Howard Voss, believed in growth." I let her have her moment. I even clapped along with the audience. She lifted the oversized scissors and posed with Theo, both hands on the handles. Click. The ribbon dropped. So did the room's illusion of safety. 2 men stepped forward, Grant and a process server named Dale, both in dark suits. Grant handed a folder to the event host, who paused mid-sentence and glanced at the seal on the envelope. Eyes widened. His microphone dropped slightly. Vivian frowned. "What's going on?" That's when I stepped onto the platform. One step, another, my heels clicked against the polished wood like a countdown. Vivian turned. She saw me, and for the first time in years, her mask slipped. She didn't speak, neither did I. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second folder mine. This, I said into the microphone the anchor had dropped, is a certified copy of Howard E. Voss's last will and testament, the real one. Gasps. Cameras turned. I am Elena Voss, I continued. Declared dead without a body, buried on paper, erased for convenience. Vivian moved toward me. You don't belong here. No, I said steady, you don't. I held up the folder. This will, I said, names me the sole heir of this land. This project you're selling as a legacy was never yours to begin with. You built your empire on stolen soil, on forged documents, on a lie. Reporters swarmed forward like bees after blood. Grant stepped beside me and raised his voice. Our firm has submitted a formal request to the Superior Court to revoke the false declaration of death. We've provided evidence of forgery, fraud, and asset theft committed by Vivian Ainsley and Theo Voss. Additionally, Vivian snapped, grabbing the microphone. Don't listen to this. She's unstable. She disappeared for years. And you forged my death while I was healing from a spinal injury in Peru, I said coldly. You hosted a fake memorial. You sold my life. Theo finally spoke, his voice shaking. Vivian, is this true? She didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. I turned back to the crowd. My grandfather believed in community, not commerce. He left this land for people, not profit, and I intend to honor that. I handed out copies of the original will, printed, notarized, authenticated. Then I stepped down past the camera crews, past the stunned audience, past my sister and cousin, who now looked like the imposters they truly were. Vivian reached out as I passed. You're going to ruin us. I looked her dead in the eye. You did that when you buried me alive. Hours later, the news segment aired across local stations and quickly made national syndication. Woman declared dead. Returns to expose family fraud at inheritance ceremony. Social media exploded. Elena Voss trended within 24 hours. Vivian's board members began stepping down. Theo issued a public apology and agreed to testify. And the Vermont State Attorney's Office opened an investigation into falsified legal documents and estate misappropriation. But I didn't celebrate. I sat alone that night on the porch of a borrowed cabin overlooking the land that used to be ours. I could still smell the faint trace of the old apple tree Pop planted the year I was born. It was gone now, cut down during phase 1 of eco-development. But I remembered, and that was enough. Because memory, like truth, has roots too deep to kill. They say revenge is loud. They're wrong. Real revenge doesn't come with fireworks or fists. It arrives quietly in ink and signatures and court dates. It's not about raising your voice. It's about becoming someone they can't speak over anymore. The judge ruled in my favor. 3 weeks after the ribbon-cutting ceremony exploded into scandal, the state officially revoked my death certificate. My legal identity was restored, my claim to the Voss estate, the land, the funds validated by the courts, the press, and public opinion. Vivian didn't show up to the final hearing, neither did Theo, but their silence said everything. And honestly, I didn't need their faces in the courtroom. I had something far more powerful, the truth and time, on my side. Vivian's name was removed from every land deed. Theo surrendered his shares in the development firm to avoid further charges. Most of their investors backed out, and what remained of Voss Meadows Eco Haven was suspended indefinitely. The board of the so-called Legacy Fund resigned en masse, and the state opened a formal inquiry into charitable misuse and tax fraud. Charges are still pending. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it was final. As for me, I declined to retake the title of owner. That's what no one expected. I stood outside the courthouse with Grant beside me and told the reporters plainly, I never wanted to own this land, I just didn't want them to desecrate it. And so I transferred the deed, every acre, into a new trust, the Howard Voss Soil and Soul Foundation. Its mission, free land and startup grants for sustainable farming by women who've been erased, survivors of domestic violence, wrongful imprisonment, and family betrayal. Women like me. Women who've had to rebuild with no inheritance but grit. I didn't sign the trust as Elena Voss. I signed it as Lena Rhodes' founding guardian, because the girl they tried to kill on paper didn't need to come back. She had already transformed. I moved into a modest cottage near the river, quiet, just enough windows and wildflowers for peace. I spend my mornings walking the land, the same way Pop used to. I talk to the trees like he did. I read applications from women whose stories mirror mine in ways that ache. Sometimes I get letters from townsfolk, some apologetic, some curious, some just silent pages with a single line. You were never gone, just hidden. I don't reply to most. Not because I'm angry, but because silence when chosen is power. One evening, I found Theo sitting on the edge of the old barn's foundation, the place where we used to build hay forts and dare each other to jump from the rafters. He looked older, humbled, smaller. I didn't think you'd come back, he said quietly. I did, I replied, you just didn't wait long enough. He stared at his hands. I wasn't brave enough to stop her. I'm sorry. I don't need your apology, I said. I needed you to tell the truth, and you did. We sat for a while, not as cousins, not as enemies. Just two people mourning the same ghost in different ways. He left before the sun set. I didn't watch him go. Vivian never reached out again. Last I heard, she moved to Arizona, changed her name, and filed for bankruptcy. Some people said she planned to write a book. Others whispered she was trying to sue me for defamation, but I wasn't worried. She'd already lost the only thing that mattered to her, the narrative. Now it was mine. Sometimes I sit beneath the last surviving apple tree, the one pot planted behind the chicken coop, the one no one thought would bear fruit again. But it did. Last spring it bloomed white and wild, a reminder that even what looks barren can surprise you if you let it live. And as the breeze runs through my hair and the dirt cools beneath my feet, I realize something I never understood before. They didn't bury me. They just made me invisible long enough to build something real in the dark. And now that it's here, I don't need to shout to prove I'm alive. I just breathe. Final scene. A young girl walks up the path toward the Trust's farmhouse office, clutching a manila envelope. Her application. She looks uncertain. I wave her inside. She pauses. Are you the one who came back, she asks. I smile, not yes, not no. I'm the one who stayed, I say, even when they tried to erase me. And I open the door, because now this legacy isn't about what they took. It's about who we welcome in.